Yes.
Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Rabbi Deb Smith, Reb Deb, and we are hosting a wonderful Passover community gathering tonight, adapting and adopting. And really, it is both in terms of Pesach. So we'll be looking at a lot of different things this evening. Traditions, some traditions from around the world that cause us to think more about how the symbols of our holiday might reflect what's going on currently in the world today, and the peoplehood of Israel. And we are all the people of Israel, so that's a collective, and personal or family priorities for this holiday. So, Nina, why don't we begin with our fantastic slideshow?
Thank you.
I think we have the best slideshows ever because Nina makes the best slideshows in the world. Okay. So there is our family, whoever they are and wherever they are, who are gathered around the Passover table, and we're going to see how we go forward. So here we are, and we're in Poland suddenly. And in Poland, the ritual that we are going to look at is reenacting the crossing of the Sea of Reeds, or the Red Sea. And if we could have a reader, I can only see part of the people on the screen, but Nina, if someone is volunteering, could you call on them because I can't?
Yeah, I actually have it full screen right now.
Nina, it's
Would you like
Diana.
to read, Diana? Please
Yeah,
read.
go ahead, Diana.
I don't mind reading.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hasidic Jews from the Polish town of Gora Kalwari reenact the crossing of the Red Sea on the seventh day of Passover by pouring water on the floor, lifting up their coats, and naming the towns that they would cross in their region of Poland. They raise a glass to each town and thank Hashem for helping them reach their destination.
Thank you, Diana. So we
No
have
problem.
some questions to ask you about this particular slide that we showed you in terms of crossing. And the question is that, the crossing that they are enacting symbolizes going from a place of constriction, a tight place, a Mitzrayim in Egypt, to a place of greater expansiveness or freedom, greater safety, a future. Just the way the Israelites that were slaves crossed into greater freedom, safety, and a future. And so the question is that we would like to put to the group: how does this relate to Poland today, where Ukrainian people are being welcomed and protected? And I'm wondering if people have any thoughts about that. Please feel free to raise your hand and unmute and share what you're thinking. If you've watched the news, you know Poland has accepted huge numbers of Ukrainian refugees coming in. Ellen?
Yeah, well, the Ukrainian-Polish border is like crossing the Red Sea. Once you get into Poland, there's safety because so many of the Ukrainians are being taken in by Polish families. And there are also a number of Jewish organizations on the border guiding people. And if they want to go to Israel, they are flown to Israel if they are Jews, if they have a Jewish relative. So that is also a destination going to Israel. And that's available there at the border.
Which is a wonderful thing. I mean, thank you for your comment. Anybody else have any thoughts about Poland accepting the refugees and what they're finding there? How they could start anew, how they could feel safer. If you've watched the news, you might have some thoughts, because it's been practically the highlight of the news, each day is what's going on, how they're setting up places for families. Erica, and then Diana.
Well, I'm glad it's a new generation and they're letting them in, because during the Holocaust, they didn't even send them to concentration camps. They just shot them right then and there.
Yeah.
I mean, they did send some to concentration camps. So it's very different. And the two rabbis from my synagogue went there this last weekend to bring supplies and to see everyone. And they were glad to see so many Jewish organizations there from Israel and from everywhere. And they felt, they said they spoke to people, and many of them felt guilty because they didn't let the Jews in. So that's, a plus. And then the rabbis went there because they felt. I'm sorry, I've got to shut off my phone.
Oh, is that your phone ringing?
Yes.
So I just want to let her finish. Yeah, go ahead.
And they said that they felt, that they wanted to be there and to welcome them just like we were, welcomed in Israel and other places. So, but he felt so many people were killed in Israel this past weekend. So he had mixed feelings.
Yeah.
But he said he wanted to welcome them and to be helpful. But at the same time, he said we should also be more appreciated and speak up and stand up for ourselves.
Thank you, Erica. I was thinking as you were talking that every time I have the TV on and I see Poland and I see what they're doing and how the people have made an effort to set up places for the children and there was just a beautiful little story on the news last night. And I thought to myself, well, we progressed forward,
Yes.
because Poland was the country, for the Jews that was, just a living tragedy in every way, back, in the past. And look at how things have changed in a different way to accept, because there's not only Jewish people crossing from Ukraine, but everyone that, there's a
Yes.
more humanitarian effort on their part to help to welcome people.
But I just want to add, but Ukraine was also terrible to the Jews. And so what goes around comes around. It's really
And now they have a Jewish
amazing.
President in the Ukraine.
Yes, and who's president? So things have changed, for the better.
Yeah, it's true. I know, Diana, you had your hand up and I think someone else did, and I don't know who the other person
Yes,
was.
I did.
Go ahead, please.
The thing is, I'm glad that Poland's continuing to let people in. They did let people in years ago, right before the Holocaust, because my mom was born on the way coming from Russia. Her mother and father and two sisters. My Bubby was pregnant with my mom. My mom was born in Poland. So it's nice that they're continuing to let people, Jewish people come into Poland and whatnot, My mother did get her American citizenship, so, So.
Thank you for sharing that. Any others before we go on a little further? And I wanted to just mention, as an aside, recalling Ukraine and remembering Ukraine, many of us are going to put olives on our Seder plates this year because that's what was suggested, or sunflowers in a vase, perhaps in our room where we're having a Seder, or also the bird of Ukraine is the nightingale. So did we send out the recording of the nightingale to the, or we're going to send perhaps?
We'll send that out. I'm making a note. We'll send that out as well.
So
for sunflower seeds, I think I'm going to add them to my karoset instead of nuts.
yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you for mentioning that. That's great. So, these are things you can do to remember and to honor Ukraine at your Seder this year, if you like, to put an olive instead of an olive branch, to put an olive on the Seder plate, to play the song of the nightingale that we will send, or to use sunflower seeds, thank you, Ellen, or to decorate with sunflowers or pictures of sunflowers.
Years ago, when they had the Russians that were being persecuted, we used to have a saying for the Russian people. I used to have an additional thing to say through the Seder. And we used to, I don't remember too well, but I think we had a Kiddush cup for them, and I think we had a piece of matzah for them also in the Seder. you know.
Yes, somebody mentioned in something I was teaching recently that they were going to put an empty chair at the table, symbolizing, having it for Ukrainians, and they were going to put something on the chair that they were going to collect and donate and send overseas, whether it was clothing or, money or tzedakah or, whatever it was. I don't remember what they said.
A lot of
But,
people were,
yeah.
a lot of people were asking, why is the olive representing the Ukraine?
For peace,
Oh,
the olive branch. Yeah.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for explaining that, because now at least I know why it was an olive. I
Yeah.
didn't know the reason why. So it's
Yeah,
an
any color
branch.
olive will do.
Okay, fine.
Roberta, go ahead.
If I could find them, they have to be kosher for Passover.
Yes, they do.
Because I have a jar here in the refrigerator I haven't eaten. My husband asked me. So tonight I went on the yo-yo and I checked. It says they have to have a kosher. So
Roberta, go ahead.
Somebody mentioned beet, since borscht is a national dish.
Yeah. Yeah, there's always borscht. There's always a beet. There's always a beet in your life, right? Well, we have a beet on our Seder plate because it's a vegan instead of the shank bone. So we have that in our house. So I wanted to go on a little bit. Did I miss anyone that would like to speak that didn't have a turn? I don't want to neglect anybody that might have a comment to make.
I have a comment, but I have talked before, but
That's okay. You can talk again.
that when you mentioned the chair, I was thinking of Rabbi Charlie from Texas, who saved the congregation by throwing a chair at the assailant. And I was thinking maybe that chair, I mean, it's in a museum now. I think a Jewish museum took the chair and the I think the wine that he offered him, or the teacup that he offered him, and put in a museum. But I was thinking that that chair has many symbolisms.
Yeah.
That chair
Yeah,
to keep
it's
the
true.
assailant away.
Yeah. Carol, I see your icon up. Thank you, Ellen.
I just want to make a comment about Poland, and this is after the Holocaust. We used to drive a couple to synagogue. They were Holocaust survivors from Poland, but they hid, so they were never in any camps. But they lost a lot of their children, and one of their sons was a young adult, and he was killed in 1946. And it was after the war, after the Holocaust, but the Poles killed him. I guess he was resistance or something like that. And the Poles killed him after the war. So I'm really, when I see what's going on in Poland, I really have mixed feelings. Have they changed, or are they just so angry at Russia because they were once a communist country, and I just don't know how to view it.
Yeah, I guess the jury is out on that one. Thank you. Cheryl, your hand is up as well.
I don't know if I heard this somewhere or read it, but I think the Poles and the Ukrainians have an affiliate. They have some affection nationally for each other.
I was just looking for you. You moved on my screen, so I had to find you. Sorry. Thank you. Any other comments before we're going to move forward? And we have next, we're going to look at a sharing of symbols with other cultures. We have a song to play for you next from Bob Marley, the Redemption Song, which refers to the story of Joseph coming to Egypt and the slavery and redemption of the Jewish people. Welcome back, everybody. And at this point, we're going to turn to Moroccan and Algerian Jews and see how they've adopted and adapted some symbols from their Islamic neighbors. Here we go. We're in Morocco at the Maimuna now, and it's a lovely picture. And we have a text that talks a little bit about this. And I'm trying to think, someone else had their hand up before, as well as Diana. And is there anyone that would like to read for us? We have the first two. Julia, I see your hand up there at the top.
Families of Moroccan and Algerian descent rejoice in the end of Passover with a Mimouna, a celebration that includes a feast of lavish sweets and pastries. A table is heaped with items symbolizing luck or fertility, many repeating the number 5, such as dough with 5 fingerprint marks or 5 silver coins. Fig leaves, live fish, stalks of wheat, and honey might also be included. Among some Moroccan Jews, participants enter the ocean and toss pebbles behind their backs to ward off evil spirits. In Islam, the hand of Fatima represents the number 5 and is also associated with the 5 senses, the 5 pillars of Islam, and the 5 daily prayers. Among the Jews, the hand of Fatima is called the hand of Miriam, Moses and Aaron's sister. It is also seen as a symbol of the 10 plagues, and it is said that the Jewish houses were marked by a hand to protect them. The hand also refers to the 5 books of the Torah.
And I wanted to follow that up with a question about the sharing of symbols. And what does that really say about the sharing of symbols? Tell us about our relationship to our neighbors from other cultures. I think there is a teaching there, and I'm wondering what lesson we learn from that. Roberta, please.
I have a question about the hand.
Yeah.
We call it the Hamsa.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they got it from us or we got it from them.
So what I would say to answer that, and I could be wrong, but I am speculating based on history and the cultures living intertwined with each other for so many, many years, that it's one of those shared and borrowed back and forth customs because both cultures had it. And, I know when I talk about the Hamsa, all my Muslim friends are like, oh yeah, but we have the, it's like they're shocked that we have it, and we're surprised to know that they have it. And the cultures have lived side by side and inside out, with each other for all these years. So, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I
Please.
have another one. Back when Jews were expelled from Spain, they moved up into Europe, and with them they brought chocolate. And I can't remember the country, but it was up there, maybe Belgium or Switzerland, or they used to have at Christmas time, they'd wrap little figures in foil. And now we, of course, have the gelt wrapped in foil. And, which came first, the gelt or I would think we borrowed from them since we were newcomers.
And it was a new custom for us. It was post-biblical. I mean, our
Oh,
custom.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. That was interesting. I didn't know that. And I wonder, I mean, for me, when I read about these borrowed symbols and borrowed, customs, I'm always like really so happy to see that cultures have borrowed from each other and kept things significant. And Francine, I see your yellow hand on the yellow wall, so I'm glad I saw that. Go ahead. Still muted. You're still muted.
You're muted.
Ringing now.
There you go. There you go.
Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry. The phone is ringing. So just feels uplifting to see that crisscross over. It's a great pattern and an uplifting pattern to see that happen. And the other thing that I had something else to say before my phone rang. It was, let me just think for a second what it was. Oh, gosh. I forgot.
You know what, we can come back if you,
I'm sorry.
just put your hand up again and we'll call on you when you remember. It's okay. And I see Shelley's hand is up. And I see Ellen's hand. Let me just, the boxes are moving. Shelley, your hand, I think, was up, and then Ellen.
Yes, I just wanted to say that we borrow lots of things culturally. So I have a very dear friend who's a Reform rabbi, and he taught us once that what we consider Jewish food is Eastern European foods, and that they were basically brought here. And that his prediction is that 500 years from now, Jewish food would be American barbecue. So if you think about where we're from, most of us who think of what's Jewish is the cuisine that we get from Eastern Europe, because that's where most of our people came from, and that's totally borrowed and not particularly Jewish anymore. And the Sephardic obviously have a whole other set of those. So we borrow food things regularly. Yeah. And even the charosis that we use for Passover is different depending on where you're from. So that was my.
Thank you. And it's true. Ellen, go ahead, please.
Well, even our Torah, some of our Torah studies, some of our Torah stories are borrowed. We were in Egypt. We did a lot of cruising, and we stopped in Egypt. And this was in October, and they were having a festival. And we were driving along the road, and all these goats were in pens, and they were going to slaughter the goats and give the meat to the poor. But the story was that they were slaughtering the goats because it was a holiday, and the holiday was because Ishmael was going to be sacrificed by Abraham, and he was saved. And I was shocked. I thought it was Isaac. I mean, in our Torah, it was Isaac who was going to be killed by Abraham and God saved him. But in their story, it was Ishmael. And they have a holiday, not Rosh Hashanah, but they have a holiday with goats that they slaughter and give them food to the poor in honor of Ishmael not being killed by Abraham, by being saved by Allah. So that was really, really a surprise.
It was really interesting studying that text in a Muslim Jewish group, which I've done. Everyone was like, really? We thought it was, our faith, and the other one's really, but we have this story on our side. So I love your sharing of that. How wonderful you got to see and experience that. Others, before we go on, about borrowing customs or adapting and adopting symbols and customs. If not, we'll go forward. And the next question I have is, we looked at the ceremony of Maimuna with all the sweets that are piled up on the table. And my question is, what kind of sweetness do you wish for the world at this season for us? What kind of Maimuna sweets, symbolic ones, would you wish for the world? And feel free to raise your hand and just pop out what you think. I would wish for the world the sweetness of peace. Anybody else? What else would people wish for the world? Ellen, your hand is up.
Oh, I don't think I put it down, but I can.
Oh, okay. So I won't press you.
I would wish for health, especially as you get older. That's a major wish for health.
Thank you. Other sweetnesses, Nina?
Cooperation.
Oh, yeah. Anybody else?
Unity.
Thank you. I think Diana had her hand up.
Get over this pandemic and no more people dying and no more shootings and muggings and killings.
Thank you.
So we have peace.
Others, any wishes of sweetness for the world?
I have one.
Oh, go ahead, Francine.
A willingness to listen to each other really listen to each other, to what we're saying.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Prosperity.
Prosperity. Someone put in respect for each other. Shelley?
Kindness.
Kindness.
Remember to be kind.
I would also wish for the sweetness of caring for the environment we live in, for the planet, and trying to respect it better and heal it, help it on its healing journey. Joy?
And food for all, enough
Oh, yes.
abundance of food.
Yeah. The sweetness of enough. Enough. Yeah. Anybody else? We have a lot of good wishes. Erica? You have to unmute. There you go.
To realize we're all connected, stop killing each other.
Yes. So if my grandmother was listening to all of these wishes that we have, she would say to each one, halavai, let it be so, it should only be that way. So that was a sort of like loose translation of my grandmother, but she's not here to correct me. So, and she was from Ukraine. So I'm thinking about her a lot these days. So with the thoughts of sweetness, we'll move on to our next set of slides and teachings. And many rabbis feel that the Haggadah is a living document. And nope, I went ahead of myself. I forgot Ethiopia, God forbid. Okay, we don't want to forget Ethiopia. Let's get a reader for Ethiopian Jewry. And who has not read that would like to offer their reading to us?
I would.
Okay, go for it. Go ahead. Thank you.
Ethiopian Jews strongly identify with the story of Passover, and because they lacked Haggadah in Ethiopia, observe a local tradition of reading Exodus directly from the Torah. In some Ethiopian families, the matriarch destroys all of her earthenware dishes and makes a new set to mark a true break with the past. During the holiday, Ethiopian Jews refrain from eating fermented dairy, such as yogurt, butter, or cheese. Matzah is homemade, often fashioned from chickpea flour, and on the morning of the Seder, a lamb might be slaughtered.
Thank you. I kept thinking when you read that about the making new dishes, like smashing all the dishes and thinking, oh my goodness, that's like really challenging. And Afghanistan, can we have a volunteer for Afghanistan to read this whipping of the scallions?
I'll read.
Okay, thank you.
Jews have lived in Afghanistan since at least the Babylonian conquest more than 2,500 years ago, but very sadly, almost none remain today. One distinct local tradition was using scallions or leeks to stand for the Egyptian slave drivers' whips, using them to lightly whip each other's backs. Today, the largest group of Afghan Jews in the world is comprised of 200 families in Queens, New York.
Thank you. We're in Spain, and also this was our cover picture when we started. Do we have a volunteer for Spain to read our text for Spain? Anybody?
I can read.
Thank you.
In a custom that began in Spain in the 14th century, the Seder leader walks around the table 3 times with the Seder plate in hand, tapping it on the head of each guest. Many Moroccan, Turkish, and Tunisian Jews adopted this Sephardic tradition, which is said to bless those whose heads are tapped. This is sometimes connected to the Talmudic custom of uprooting the Seder plate so that guests might ask questions about the Jews in Egypt.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellen. Syria? Anybody to volunteer to read it for Syria?
I'll read again if you want.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
No problem. The custom of breaking the middle matzah on the Seder table into pieces known as yafat can sometimes take on Kabbalistic meaning. Matzah broken into the shape of the Hebrew letters Daled and Vav, corresponding to the numbers, which in turn add up to 10, representing the 10 holy emancipations of Hashem. Jews from North Africa, including Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, Libya, Libya, break the matzah into the shape of the Hebrew letter A, which corresponds to the number 5.
Okay, so we have a little gematria going on there with the 10 emanations, which are the sphirot that are Kabbalistic, and the number 5. So yeah, you could go to the next one. I just wanted to.
Rabbi, could I say one thing?
Yeah.
Somebody put up in the Passover recipe exchange that to keep the kids occupied after they say the blessings over the matzah, someone hands out cards with different shapes or flags, and then the kids have to eat a piece of matzah and make it into the shape of what's on their card, and they're not supposed to show it to anyone else. So that seems like what this was explaining. Maybe that's where that person got that game,
Yeah.
make the shape of the matzah.
Yeah, that's challenging. That's certainly a challenging game.
Yeah, and then the person who guessed the most would get a prize, like who finds the afikomen, so. It was interesting, one way to keep the kids occupied.
Sure is. South Africa, and apples are the key ingredient for this one. This looks delicious, this one. And I think we have a reading for this one as well. Not sure. Is there a reading here, or are we just?
You didn't see the reading? Here.
No, I can't see it. No.
Oh, weird. Okay, hold on.
Okay.
There it
It looked like there was cirrhosis inside the apple.
Okay, there we go. We've got the readings up. Do we have a volunteer who maybe hasn't read and would like to read, or somebody?
Sure.
Judy, go
Yeah.
ahead.
South Africa has a vibrant and thriving Jewish community with a history that reaches back to immigration from Europe in the 19th century. Today, around 70,000 Jews remain. Despite the adherence to tradition, local influences still sneak into the Seder meal. They have traditional gefilte fish, but it's more ball-shaped and has yellow tint to it from saffron. Most striking is South Africa's positioning in the Southern Hemisphere, which means North America's familiar autumn produce is in season during South Africa's spring. Let's see, the result. I might not be able to finish reading this. Wait a minute. Oh, sorry, I've lost it.
Okay, I'll finish it. The result, apples are a key ingredient in the Passover menu. From the traditional charoset to the bits of green apple, lending crunch and sweetness to chopped herring and apples stewed with cinnamon and cloves for dessert, which was the picture we saw. Thank you, Judy, for reading for us. I think we've completed our customs round of slides. And Joy, yeah.
Yes, I have a question, I guess. When we were reading about Ethiopia and they were breaking the dishes and getting a new set, don't people at Passover time change to different dishes?
Sure.
So I don't know if there's a connection. I have no idea, but it just popped into my head.
Yeah.
Yes, we do change our dishes for Passover. That we're not eating any hummus.
Yeah, we just learned from our rabbi that earthenware dishes can't be koshered.
No, so they can't, or stoneware either, or Pharrell either.
So you can't use them for Passover
Nope.
because you can't kosher them. I do ceramics, and it's very hard to get the glaze just so, and they're porous. So, and our current glazes are lead-free, but I think in the past they weren't. So you might be very careful with earthenware dishes.
Yeah, you're right. I know that from my own experience and learning about them. So we have another series of topics to look at regarding the Haggadah. And many rabbis believe that the Haggadah is a living document that can change to reflect major events in Jewish history, as well as social changes. I'm one of those rabbis. I do believe that. To that end, we have editions such as Kos Miriam and the Fifth Child. And many people create, their own traditions for the holiday. There are so many out there, it's hard to even keep track of them. And these traditions reflect what's important to them. And we're going to look at some traditions from around the world and what they represent, and then have a discussion about that.
So we just looked at some traditions from around the world.
Yeah.
Right. And so I can start off sharing, my family has traditions that we've invented, and I'm sure that you do too. And we're looking forward to hearing what they are. I always love Bidikat Chametz, looking for the Chametz. My kids and now my grandkids take the chametz we find, and we don't burn it the next morning, which is the traditional way. We go out and feed it to the birds. And that kind of reflects a priority of ecology and, helping other animals and respect for other creatures.
Anybody else have any traditions that you have evolved or created that are, specific to your family or your group? Roberta? You're muted. You're muted. Still muted.
You're still muted.
Roberta, touch your space bar. Put your finger on your space bar and hold it. That'll release the muting.
There you go.
And just hold it there while you.
Okay, I think we had a tradition of stealing the afikomen, and my father or grandfather would wrap it in a napkin and put it between two pillows. And we had to steal it and hide it in order to get our reward. Others have the children hide it. So I guess it just depends what your family's traditions are, but we always love the stealing.
Thank you.
Family traditions, what was it? Priorities?
Yeah. Cheryl, go ahead.
To continue on what she was just saying, in our family, it depended on who was leading the Seder about the afikomen, because some members of the family had it so that the children stole the afikomen and hid it, and then the adults had to redeem it. But when my father led a Seder, he would hide it and the children had to go find it. So different family value or traditions, even within the same family.
Yeah, that's a good example of that. I'm wondering if what we've learned tonight, I want to throw another question in. If you've been inspired to add anything to your Seder or to your traditions based on some of the customs we've seen, maybe, your families came from some of these places and you might want to create a link in culture or something, or have you been inspired to add something new to your Seder this year that you might wish to share with us? Shelley?
Yeah, I just received today a link from Hayes. They have their Haggadah, and it has an interesting tradition to start the Seder of having someone go to the front door and put a pair of shoes by the door to symbolize that we are walking in the same shoes as refugees, as we were refugees, and to welcome them into the Seder. And I thought that was a really, if you look up Pius, you probably can get a link. It's a wonderful Haggadah that they've put out with many, many good things in it to add to your Seder.
Oh, I really like that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Anybody else inspired to add? Is there anyone we haven't heard from tonight that would like to share before we ask people to continue sharing? Anybody? Okay. So we have no other people who are sharing ideas with us, but if you do get inspired to add something, please raise your hand and let us know.
Diana has her hand.
Diana, Roberta, go ahead.
Yeah, I might add the olive. My husband could get kosher for Passover olives. But
Okay.
our thing at our Seder, I bought for my grandson, and we still do it at the Seder, even though he's not here, is we have the 10 plagues. This is the beast. This is the frog, and it jumps across the table.
That's great. Thank you.
And the one which he loves the best is the hail. We still do this. We throw it across the table. And my grandson's favorite was he would sit there for darkness. He would sit the whole Seder with the glasses on like a movie star.
These are good for sharing. Thank you. Roberta,
we have all the 10 plagues. It comes in a bag.
Oh, okay.
It's 25 years old.
Thank you, but it's preserved well. Go ahead, Roberta, you're unmuted.
Yeah, we have all those. We have the plagues, but we use ping pong balls and little frogs that everybody gets, and they push the bottom of it and it flops across the table. I put ants on. I put, I have this giant grasshopper that's about this big. We just have all the plagues. It's such fun.
Yeah, we have frogs. I know we got frogs.
This is a very creative group we have here.
Another thing we do is we learned from our in-laws is we take sheets, and for crossing the Sea of Reeds, 2 adults hold it and sort of flap them up and down, and the kids cross in between.
I'm going to do that. Thank you for that idea. I'm definitely doing that one.
And I am going to put sunflowers on our table because my grandmother came from Odessa, or near Odessa, not the city, but near Odessa.
Yeah, that's really nice to do. I have some in a tall vase. I have some, and I'm going to put them out. My grandmother came from Donetsk, so it just.
My grandmother came from Poltava, which is right near the Kiev. One grandmother.
And it's interesting because for myself, I can speak honestly and say I wouldn't have thought to do that if this was not going on. It's really brought it into the forefront of my thinking, and it's difficult, but my grandfather came from there as well, so it's a way to honor my grandparents and bring them to the Seder along with others, from their areas, from their towns. So are there any other, I just would like to circle back and ask if there are any thoughts that surfaced for people in our adapting and adopting program for tonight about Passover, and if you learned something new that you'd like to share with us, or were inspired by something that you heard, feel free to just, raise your hand and tell us what you picked up tonight that might be something interesting and new for you. And if you knew all these customs, kol hakavod, that means you're very well versed in international customs from around the universe.
We have a Haggadah that we put out a couple of years ago, where some of our members told us the things that they did at their Seders. There was a Kos Ruth, which was very nice. It was for anybody who had converted to Judaism. That was lovely. And actually, I'll send out the PDF of this Haggadah because there's a lot of interesting things in that we might want to do. And while we're talking, I'm remembering that my great-grandfather used to, when they were letting in Eliyahu, he would sneak out and wrap himself in a sheet and then show up at the front door, which was always a little bit scary. It's an interesting tradition.
We had an interesting tradition. We would spend Passover with friends of ours every year. And this was an interfaith couple. And my friend was Jewish, her husband was not. They had been married like forever. And he led the Seder every year. He led the most dignified Seder ever. And so one of the couples that came every year was a non-Jewish couple they were the oldest friends of the people we were visiting. And their son was like our kids' age. And every year we had a dyed, roasted, painted egg on the Seder plate because, Jonathan wanted his egg and he wanted to have something represented. And every year his dad would wrap himself in a sheet, which is what made me think of it. And he'd go out and come in to be, Elijah, and he would drink the cup of wine. So these are fond memories because these folks, unfortunately, are no longer with us. And so it's a way we remember them every year. And when our friends moved and retired and moved down to South Carolina, they left on my doorstep the box of Haggadahs, their Passover dishes, their Passover glassware, that's tablecloths, everything. And I thought that was so touching. They just, left it for us to carry on the tradition. Passover has not been the same since. Shelley?
You reminded me of a story. I have a very dear friend who unfortunately passed away this year, but she was not Jewish, and she wanted me to come to an Easter dinner, and it was Passover. So there was a kosher butcher in town that we lived in then, and I said, well, if I bought the lamb, kosher lamb, would you make it? And would you, make sure you give me some vegetables and things that I would eat? And she said, sure, she would do that. I said, okay, I'll bring my own desserts because I wouldn't eat her desserts. But we had a kosher for Passover Easter dinner. And I brought her an Easter bunny and I made a little yarmulke and put it over his ears. And she kept that all her years. Moshe the Easter bunny. So
thank you.
Cheryl?
Well, I learned about the, I'm looking at my notes. Oh, about the Moroccans with the Mimuna.
No, the Maimuna, yeah.
Because I know about Seder Sheni, which our Hadassah group is going to do a variation of this year, which happens at the end. But I didn't know about the sweeps and things like that went with the Maimuna. And let's see, I think I was going to say something else, but I'm not remembering what it was. I'm sorry.
Well, but you mentioned something important. You mentioned Pesach Sheni for those who maybe did not get a chance to observe Pesach, and it comes up, a month later, and they have the opportunity to observe and do Pesach Sheni if they haven't done the first Pesach. So
I thought about what I wanted to add. This year, First Seder is on Good Friday, and we have interfaith family, and so they won't eat meat on Good Friday, so we're having salmon.
Not a bad thing, said I, a lover of salmon. So, I think that's a good thing. We decided to do an Israeli Seder this year with doing all Israeli food for our Seder. Audrey, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. What is Pesach Sheni? I've never heard of that.
It's the second Pesach. And it occurs a month after the first Pesach. And
is this something new or is this something old or?
No, it's been around forever.
Never heard of it.
Yeah,
Is it when there are 2 months of Adar? Is it on a leap year? Or is it
always? No, it's always. It's not whether it's a leap year or not. It's forever. It just is.
I'll send some info in the follow-up email. My friends and I have had a tradition for 30 years. We call it the bad food lunch. It's at the end of Passover. You take all your leftovers and we would bring them all together and eat them. But now we tend to be in California every April and do Passover here. So Pesach Sheni, we will have our bad food dinner with the same bad leftover stuff.
So, Roberta?
Our daughter's family is vegetarian and our son's family is not. So we're going to have a blended Seder with vegetarian. My daughter's going to make blintzes with cottage cheese and asparagus.
Oh.
And I will be making a brisket. Not that we keep kosher, but we've got to satisfy everybody's needs.
My heart goes out to you because we're doing a vegan and a non-vegan Seder together. And my husband is vegan. He's strictly vegan. Everyone else in the family wants the real food. They want their matzo ball soup. So we're having two kinds of matzo ball soup, vegan and normal, and a lot of other stuff that way. It's going to be a lot of cooking for us. Cheryl?
I have a dish that I've been making for several years for vegetarians and vegans. It's quinoa is now considered kosher for Pesach if you're not, or I don't know about the Orthodox, but in conservative and liberal movements. And so I do stuffed cabbage filled with quinoa, or stuffed peppers filled with quinoa.
Yeah, that's a great recipe. So we'll take one more comment. Audrey, it's you. It's
not a comment, it's a question.
Okay.
I was just reading the other day that now it is considered kosher for Passover, baking soda and baking powder. It was never considered kosher for Passover. And the baking powder, as long as you don't get one with cornstarch. But so there was this whole discussion on chemical leavening versus whatever the other kind of leavening is. I guess yeast. I just never heard of that. What do you think?
I have not, so I'm sure other people have, but I have not read about it, or it's
it has to say the baking soda does not have to have a kosher. The baking powder does. And Cheryl, if you need a salmon recipe, I have one I could email you. And it's on my in my email, and it's salmon croquettes, and it's strictly for Pesach, and you put tomato sauce or whatever you want on top of it. It's really good.
So we're about to close because we're over time, and I know people are, going to start to sign off if we don't end on time. But Roberta, if you want to comment, people are leaving, but please feel free.
What about vinegar? Somebody told me that vinegar isn't kosher for Passover.
I do not hold myself out there as a products expert, so I cannot respond. I'm not.
You have to have vinegar, which is kosher for Pesach. It has to have a B for Passover.
You got to look for the
My husband's been going crazy trying to find it.
So.
Okay, because I do have a bottle of vinegar that's kosher and parv. But I didn't know.
I would think it would be parv.
You might try
milk.
I don't know what the ingredient that has to be taken out for Passover.
Well, yeah, some of them are distilled, which means they have grain. It's made from grain, some vinegars, but you can use apple cider vinegar.
Thank you for telling me that.
Yeah, so if you have questions on products, please check your hechshers, consult your local rabbis or whoever is your Mara Da'atra on the law of the land where you live. And we want to wish everyone a very sweet, happy and peaceful and healthy, above all, Pesach. And we look forward to seeing you at our next program. Thank you for joining us and for all the sharing that everybody did.